just going to hit record now. So we are recording live now, and I'm going to share my screen with you, and we'll go straight into the presentation. And I will start off just with an introduction to Simon. I think everyone knows Simon, been on our calls quite a few times. Simon, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, I guess in the context of this, I'm going to put on my head of architecture hat. Last role I did was head of architecture, enterprise architecture for Boots and WBA. And one of the things that we were looking at that was a complete refresh of the sort of modern workplace sort of experience. So in that kind of context today, that's the hat I'll be on. Sam, it seems to be different every week, so I think we need to get consistent what it is. But anyway, all good. Cool.
Well, thanks again for your time today, Simon. We've got a great set of presentations to go through this morning. So just to give you a little bit of an agenda, we go through the presentation. Should take us between 20-25 minutes, and then we'll open up to the floor, and feel free to ask any questions about the presentation and speak to either Simon or Paddy from a technical point of view. So without further ado, I'm going to mute myself. Simon, just give me the nod when you go to the next slide. And then everyone else, if you can mute yourself for now, and then we'll bring you in at the end for questions.
Bro, okay, on we go. Ready to go, Sam? Next slide. Oh, there we go. Cool. So morning, everybody. I'm pretty sure at the end of the last session, Sam said that I wouldn't be presenting this week, but we've kind of, he did. Tracy's nodding. He definitely said that, didn't he, Tracy? So apologies. I'm going to start with an apology. It appears that I'm doing a bit of presentation again, but it's a double act with Paddy, so which is fantastic. I've got to know Paddy this week, and awesome guy and great knowledge. So I just want to set the context a little bit around the modern workplace. We've, some of the sessions I've done and some of the sessions we've heard, we've heard from, Andrew Gadd, and we've heard from David and Co in data analytics about, the sort of things in the digital transformation. Modern workplace for me very much at the moment is all around, we talk about the new normal. It's a new way of working. You've got to have, we're thinking the ways of working. In fact, we're doing it now. We're collaborating in different ways that maybe we hadn't done before. What determines a workplace? How do people work together? Is all going to change. I don't think. I mean, Tracy, some of your early sessions, we talked about we're not going to go back to the office in the same way that we had where we would. I think we're talking about maybe the end of the year or even next year, or not going back at all in certain companies, if that's right. And how we actually operate as a workplace. So what is a new normal, we don't really know, but what effectively from a modern workplace experience, we need to be able to collaborate differently. We need to connect more easily and collaborate, across the globe, across businesses. And that covers a whole range of things, how we do email, calendaring, how we do voice, ubiquitous, we're not tied to a desk anymore. How can we tie everything maybe, or do everything via voice or mobile devices, and this comes really important as well about accessibility. How can some of these new normals improve accessibility and collaboration and interaction. Conferencing, we're doing it now. It's on Zoom. We're going to talk about particularly another product set today, or Paddy is, but that. How we do video and conferencing, that is becoming the new norm, rather than us all sitting in a big room together, sort of in the COVID world. How can I find people? The whole directory and identity. How can I make sure I can contact with them and get in contact with them, so on and so forth. And desktop and mobility. We are not working at a desk the way we used to. So how, Sam loves to work in a coffee shop around the corner. Can't remember if you're a Costa or a Starbucks guy, Sam, but it's a new modern way. Well, actually, by the way, we all strive to maybe even work outside. And I met up with somebody else actually on the call yesterday. For the first time in 4 months, I went out and actually worked outside. It was a pub lunch. I don't know about you guys, it's the most exciting thing I've done in 4 or 5 months. Scary as well, but it was amazing. You know, having a pint and a pie in a pub, doing some work over an iPad. Awesome. But it's these tools and that mobility piece that really makes it. So the modern workplace experience, we've talked about it. COVID's changed the world. We need to have a think about what the new normal is.
I think
Sam?
on that conference in front as well, when we talked about it earlier with the Surface devices, I don't know if anyone out there has used it before, but you have like a virtual whiteboard. I've used them quite a lot over the last couple of years, and it really does make a difference, because that's one of the things you miss out on when you're working, when you're all in an office and you've got a board and everyone can get up and write on it, and doing those conference calls, you kind of miss that reality. So bringing that piece in, it does bring you all closer, and it means you can chuck your ideas up and actually get involved, rather than just sit and listen to one person transmit. They're fantastic tools to work with, and it does make a big difference to how we need to work now.
Absolutely. Is Mr. Gadd on the call?
I can see him up there, yeah.
Yeah, it's probably on mute, but we did that at WBA. We actually had these big Surface screens, and the guys in Chicago and the guys in Nottingham were working in real time. You know, that's the kind of thing. But you need those big screens, that's fine. But, you know, I don't know if you see it, iPad, you can do it all on an iPad. Oh, there you go. Green screen doesn't work, but you can do it all on an iPad and have literal, you know, these things virtually. It's that. This is what the new normal means, and this is what the digital enablement means. It's more flexibility, more accessibility, more connection, more collaboration. Sam, can we move on? So we're going to talk a little bit. Paddy in particular is going to talk about this, the Microsoft approach to this. But you know, it's really is, you know, the things that we do today, and this is a Microsoft example, and then how we transition that across. You know, we're all used to using things like Outlook for email, or Skype, or WebEx, or, you know, all these various bits of technology to try and, you know, either content share, do email and calendaring, you know, shared drives, etc. As part of this modern workplace, you know, and modernizing the workplace, we need to transition as well. We need to improve the user experience. I think everybody on the call, I don't think there's anybody under 20. I hope I don't offend anybody as I look around. But you know, we're all used to things being really disjointed. You do your email over here, you know, you jump on WebEx or Zoom as an example, you know, to do video comps, and then you're jumping over here. It's that experience is very, very, very disjointed, and the ability to actually share information and collaborate in things is tricky. And there's a number of vertical ecosystems that are out there. You know, there's the Microsofts, there's the Google, Amazon's trying to get into that game as well now, believe it or not, in terms of some of their verticals. So when we look at that modern workplace, one of the things we need to be doing is, and again, this is all part of digital transformation, this is all part of the change and transformation agenda. We should be looking at what the user experience is, what the user journeys are, and fundamentally it's about improving. I've always got to remember the user's at the heart of this. You know, it's easy to just think it's a nice bit of cool piece of technology, but you have to think about the user journeys and the benefits that they're going to get whenever you're doing a modernization and a modern workplace sort of program or project. Sam, can you move on? So the thing that we're going to talk a little bit about today, don't worry about reading this slide. So don't panic it. It's very small. I'll put it on deliberately as a kind of thought provoker. One of the things that I've found really interesting over the last couple of years is the transformation that Microsoft have made from something like Office 365 into Microsoft 365. It's not just about Office anymore. It really is truly trying to get this modern workplace experience and collaboration, accessibility. You know, they've introduced whole new things around, and I think Damian's on the call, myself and Damian have been speaking about this, closed caption translation, real-time translation of video calls that can help visually impaired and so on, or audibly impaired as you're doing it, but also can document those meetings in real time and have full minutes later that you can go back and review. They've applied a wide range of AI and different types of technologies in order to improve productivity. It's a huge suite. It is a huge suite. There's a whole bunch of change in there, and that's a key thing that Paddy's going to touch on later, as well as you really need to think in each of these modern workplaces at the moment. It's not just rolling out email. It's not just rolling out a calendar. It's not just rolling out a video conferencing. When you're looking at the modern workplace, using the user journey and experience, you really need to think about change and adoption. Andrew, if you can speak, I don't know if you want to maybe just talk about this for a minute, but the whole change and adoption piece, and certainly some of the programs you've been around this, it's been a big piece. He's still on mute, so I'm presuming he can't speak. He probably has gone to the toilet or powdering his nose or something. He's off. But I mean, just 2 seconds. I mean, view and change and adoption around that modern workplace piece. What do you think? It's not a small beer, is it?
It's pivotal to actually defining the requirement. To be honest with you, because you can go into these engagements with a huge tool set, and then all of a sudden it's like a kiddie in a sweet shop, and you're clustering the operating model with all of these different capabilities, and it can very, very quickly fall foul of just getting out of sync. So it all starts with being able to define where the criticality is in the requirement and making sure you've got the right level of engagement, so you don't overwhelm the organization with tools, but you do the right thing at the right time. And a massive role of this is an educational part, because certainly around some of the capabilities around teams, where they've got everything available to them, but all they're really doing is just providing another platform for them to be disorganized on. And you've got another.
Sorry, I'm not on mute, but that's so true. The multitude of like Zoom, Google, Skype, and all of that, people sending out different invites, it does cause a lot of confusion for that.
Yeah, Sam logging into the same meeting twice.
Yeah, and even compliance and things like that, from a security perspective, all of a sudden they're sharing information on Teams that possibly they shouldn't be sharing, or should only be sharing for a short amount of time. So the business change side of it is critical. It's not just about the tech. The tech's the enabler. It's about the usage patterns and the control patterns around it, really.
Yeah. I've just noticed another limitation of tech. When you mentioned the G word, Paddy, my phone buzzed here. I think it thought you said, "Okay, Google."
Really? Fantastic.
Yeah, and my Google speaker just went off as well.
I'm just going to put my phone across the other side of the room.
It's normally the Amazon one that does it for me, but anyway.
But when you've got that same standard across the board, so when I've implemented it before, it does simplify it. So it's so much easier. You're running from one meeting to the next, or you're running from the kitchen back to your desk. You're just clicking on the same bit instead of running across the bottom of your taskbar, figuring out, am I in Google Meet? Am I in Zoom? And though that simplifies it all, it makes it a lot easier for everyone to work on. And the adoption piece around it as well is, if everyone's got the information they need, and they can see they've got their FAQs and how do I links to the media, it just makes it all a bit smoother. So after a bit of a tough time of a month or so, everyone slots into it and gets used to it.
Yeah,
it does work very well.
Yeah, cool. Please, Sam, if you could move on. You're glad to hear this is my last piece in it, but I guess Microsoft has a very strong view of a modern workplace vision. To me, they're actually one of the thought leaders in this space compared to some of the other technology providers, and it's a very holistic view. But what they're really looking at is Microsoft Teams actually becoming the heart of the user interactions. It's the one place, and kind of to Paddy's point and Andrew's point, there's challenges associated with this as well, but it's the one place that you'll go to chat, to video conference, audio conference. It's fully integrated with all the various pieces, the Outlooks, the SharePoints, the OneDrives. You can in real time collaborate on, and you don't need Teams for this bit, to be fair, but with Office 365 as part of the Microsoft 365 piece, you've got the ability to have real-time collaboration on Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Yeah. And I do mean real-time collaboration, and I've done a global project actually with Microsoft where I was a client, and we had 7 or 8 people all editing the document at the same time. And it sounds painful. It's actually, the technology it works, and it just saves so much time. So I think there's a really interesting sort of vision here that Microsoft has, the one, but I do think they're quite a leader in terms of that. There's different approaches that we could take around this. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to hand over to Paddy, who's going to give you some the real world on how to approach a project, what the gotchas are, things to think about, who needs the skills that need to be involved, and some of the timescales and costs. So as ever, ask questions as we go through. We'll address them at the end, or Sam will stick his hand up and we can dive in. But Paddy, if I can hand over to you now, and you can take the team through.
Okay, no problem. So Sam, if you can move to the next slide, please.
No problem, Paddy.
So you can see there's a pictorial piece on the journey you have to take for your Office 365 migration, your project timeline. So I've kept it very high level and out of the weeds. As Simon said, please do ask me questions as we go through it. So the first phase basically is a massive audit of your estate. You need to make sure that we understand where you are in your platform, and as I'll explain later on, that then does have an impact on your timelines and your costs. If everything's in place and you're in a 100% perfect Microsoft environment, which I've never seen in 21 years, then it's great. We can just slap Office 365 and Windows 10 out there, but it's never the case, and we all know that. So you need to be looking at the stuff like servers, components, your network, authentication solutions. We're looking at your directory designs. You're coming down to details such as your bandwidth, how your email gets routed, certificates, your hardware and software platforms, so the hardware devices as well, especially for Windows 10. Everything needs to come up to speed and make sure you've got the right spec out there. And then obviously you've got your logistics of swapping those devices out and stuff like that before you deliver Office 365 and Windows 10. Your mail and other client applications. Am I still in here or just beeped? Oh, sorry, just checking. Something beeped and I thought I'd dropped out then.
No, you're in, Paddy. We can hear you, mate.
Here. Okay. Yeah. So once you've done all that, you're then looking at your strategy for your email migration. You're looking at your mailbox sizes. What mailboxes are you going to bring across? Which ones are legacy? What can you archive? Then business-related content, so the files and folders that have got to come across. Your permissions, who owns what, and that there's complications in that. But again, this is an audit. You've got to drains up, bring everything out into the open, and make sure we understand every single aspect of what's going to be affected by Office 365 and Windows 10. And also look at the future proofing as well, what we're going to do in the future. So if we're looking at a new application or database in a year's time, do we need to bring that forward and do it now because of the amount of work that's going to be done, or does it need to be de-scoped and held on to? Yeah, I touched on the network piece and your bandwidth. Because we're now going cloud central, you've got to make sure that your bandwidth can handle, as Simon touched on earlier, everyone piling onto Teams for a corporate presentation. Everyone's going to be on this. You've got to have that bandwidth that can cope that. So you've got to test it to the max. In your mobile platforms as well, making sure that if people have got devices out there, have they got the right AVT on there? Have they got the right operating system? Does it do what they need to? If it's their own device, are they happy for permissions to go onto it, for software, etc., to go onto it from the company? And then the comms plan as well, the adoption and the change piece that comes through there. Then once you've got that done, you're looking at your second phase. So as we move into that second phase, as it says, you're going to start to then implement any changes. So changes for SCCM, etc., bringing that up to the right version so you can pilot out. Verify your domains. You're going to clean up your Active Directory. You're going to be looking at enabling single sign-on. Again, all of this feeds into the FAQs and how do I, to make sure everybody understands not just what we're doing in the background, but how the changes of how they access the devices. So it all feeds into that. Directory synchronization tools, configuring the email coexistence. So if you've got a site out in Lisbon with very poor bandwidth, you're going to want to keep all of their email files and folders on-prem, possibly, and then the rest can go up into the cloud. Or is it all going to go in the cloud? So as you migrate across, there's a switch over. and so you have to consider how that strategy is going to work and how it will exist out there, and then be looking at your plan for what you're going to do in the future. SharePoint, again, pretty much the same points for SharePoint and the rollout for that, and then migrating the existing SharePoint content across in phases, in batches, and then the comms that go out and tell people, so there's trigger points to let them know when it goes on. And then applications and the desktop setup as well. So that's one of the most important pieces, but making sure all your applications are packaged up and ready to go, and lead times for that.
I think just to build on that, Paddy, one of my top tips for anybody on this call that is looking to do these types of projects is do not underestimate the legacy, I'm going to use a vernacular, crap that is out there, right?
Yeah.
Do not underestimate the key for most of these things is identity. It's actually having a clean, single view of what the person is, the individual is, and in the Microsoft world that is Active Directory, and bringing together a single Active Directory. If you really want that global collaboration, as Paddy says, you can have things on-prem and in the cloud in a mix, but you really need to bring that directory and that strategy and that identity strategy together. So that the design is really, really important. And if you get some of these critical path pieces, these core elements done properly up front, it makes Paddy's job much, much easier.
Oh yes.
As you go through. If you don't and you have a fragmentation, A, you won't get the benefit, but B, you'll end up with and it's quite typical, and by the way, in a medium to large organization, to have multiple directories of people, because they've exchange here and exchange here and this over here, but you really need to bring them in. So certainly my tip is make sure, I would say this, I'm an architect potentially at heart, so sorry everybody, but get the design right. It's get that upstream activity, understand the requirements. The discovery is fundamental. Understand,
definitely key.
Get out all those skeletons, and then get the design right to flush it out. And Paddy will tell you, one of the things you might need to do as part of your prep or your design of your implementation is you might have to do multiple steps before you can even migrate into the cloud. Is that right, Paddy, in terms of versions?
Yeah, definitely. So for SharePoint, you have to go version by version. I know that for sure. So you've got to make sure you've got that planned in, because that's lead time. It takes up bandwidth. It's got to be done in the background. And then you've got to OAT and UAT, operationally test it, and then use the testing to verify that all the data is there. Definitely the case. I've done quite a few of these types of migrations. One of the pieces that most corporations shy away from is that initial audit and due diligence, because it can be costly, both in time and money, but mostly in time. But at the end result, when you get to that end, you won't be celebrating, because you'd have missed 10% of applications or users. You can't. Lucky. Yeah. So you can't get it out there. And then the question comes back from CIO to say, actually, do you know, how come we've missed 500 users? Why didn't? And I have had an example of this. So I won't name names, but we got to the end of just a simple Windows 10 project, and they wouldn't audit. We got to the end of it. There was 500 devices out of a 5,000 device estate that wasn't done, but it was business critical devices. And I got asked why they weren't migrated. And then I then pulled out the email that said, this is your email telling us that we don't need to audit. We can do it on site as we get to site. You're going to cause yourself issues. Getting that all right, those first two phases, they're imperative for a good, positive 99.9% result.
Yep.
So we've pretty much talked through the piece that we're talking about there, which is on the right-hand side. Oh, sorry, didn't go through the final phase, did I? So the actual migration, skipping ahead there. So the final phase, moving the mailboxes and moving the data, deploying Office 365, deploying Windows 10, getting that out there. So you're looking at the licenses, installing the staff, informing the staff, so the comms plan, the communications, and the emails that are going out. Then we're going to look at migrating mailboxes. I will skip through this because it does go into I can go into quite a bit of detail. But you go into stuff like changing DNS records and that, so there's a lot going off in the background. Then you've got your mobile estate as well, so you need to make sure you're capturing all those. You also need to be thinking about, again, coming down to bandwidth, and our current environment is, you would say if you had an office with 1,000 people, you would set out, you go and collect 50 devices a day and bring them back and build them, or you build them at desk. That's all changed now. So it may be that you've only got a certain amount of people in the office, and then people are at home. So you need to be checking whether they're happy for their bandwidth to be tied up and that. So all of this comes into that piece of work where we're looking at collating the data, but also the approach. That's what I was saying, where it impacts on how you deploy and your scheduling and deployment approach. So you're also going to be looking at Office templates, email signatures, and ensuring that everyone's secured, have got the right ABT, and that's all come out. At that point, you are actually starting to migrate. You're pushing through. We do our lessons learned as we go along. We put a T- plan in place as well, so we make sure that everyone we migrate to is in the right place. We've checked all the boxes. We've made sure that they have everything they need. It doesn't necessarily get rid of all the issues that we'll see, but what it does is bring them down to a manageable size. So we can manage 5% of it not working and we've missed it, and then we can evolve as we go along. Then we're going to look at the usual steps. So I won't go into any detail around the migration shutdown, but you're just looking at mop-up, lessons learned, then the knowledge transfer, the documentation coming across, and then demobbing the team. And then you can look at closing that down. To go back to the point that Simon was talking about, if there are certain aspects of the migration that can't take place and you do have to de-scope them, it does just extend the project timeline. Maybe not for this actual program, you're still going to spend the same money as a business, but don't forget at the moment as well, especially for Office 365 and Windows 10, January 2021, we're looking at Windows 7 not being supported. We're looking at Office 365 being the main product. Nobody's going to be making software for Windows 7 platforms, and there's no software updates or security updates. So people are, we are looking at, you need to get this work done where it is. So we come back to phase 1 and phase 2. It's very important to make sure you cover it and you get it done.
Just jumping on the gotchas of that, because that's part of the gotcha, Paddy.
Yeah, sure. Let's move on to that. So if you go to the next slide, please, Sam. Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry, Sam, just quickly, the previous slide. There we go, yeah.
So the network side of things, we've touched on quite a bit, I think. Ensuring you've got that out there. The inventory is another key point there. So the making sure that we've got the correct data and it's up to date and it's fluid. So you've got a data manager there who's constantly checking Active Directory, FCCM, ServiceNow or Workplace, whatever your HR tools are, and making sure that's all kept up to date. Legacy infrastructure as well. So Simon, we spoke about this a little bit earlier. The legacy infrastructure and it working as a hybrid when it's out there from Exchange. It's if you're still running that, you've got 2 sets of costs, and then how are you going to migrate that across? If you've got a network issue that causes you to keep legacy infrastructure, you need to be looking at what's the mitigation plan to get rid of that.
Yep. Sam?
Sam? So the gotchas, these are my top three. So the comms plan, I have actually been on a project where a director of an IT department, business, did not want to do a comms plan. It's imperative that you've got a good communications plan. The how do I's, the FAQs, telling people where they need to go, all of this improves the perception of the project. All of this makes the user's journey much more comfortable. They know where to go. They know how to raise a call. Believe it or not, I think quite a few people out there might not have raised calls in certain departments. So it's making sure that everybody knows where they can get their information, where they can go to get help and assistance. And it's even more important these days because you won't have loads of floor walkers walking around on an office floor so they can raise their hand and get their issues sorted. So the comms plan is a real big piece of work that's got to be looked at. It needs to be as clean cut and as easy to use as possible. The data and auditing. So again, I touched on this a little bit earlier. It does take a little bit of work to do the cleanse of the data set. What happens with this data is the data will give you your scope, obviously, but it also tells us our timelines, and it tells us what resources we need to be out there. So when we're looking at the platforms and what your digital estate looks like at the current point in time, it tells us what resources we need to pull in to do the project, but it also makes sure that we're giving the right applications access. Your mailboxes, one of the biggest problems we've had on the previous project was migrating. There's like a matrix for mailbox ownership. So you have to make sure the mailbox owner goes across before the users. Now, I don't know if that's changed, Simon. You'd have to steer me clear.
It's still there.
It's still there, yeah.
Especially if you get shared folders. So,
yeah. So you've got your schedule by departments, but then you've got your schedule by mailboxes as well, and then that includes work streams. You know, so the guy in stores to the guy that pushes the stuff into the back of the truck. That work stream goes through several departments. They all need to be in the same mailbox. They all need to be migrated at the same time, or do they? Don't they? So you have to take that in. It does get incredibly complex. So the data management is key to making sure we get the schedule right, which is key to making sure we get T-, which is key to making sure as we migrate, we're migrating the right stuff with the right people, with the right access and shares, and they can see their data and they can work. So it gets very, very complicated. And if you're in, for example, a logistics business, if that chain falls down, your business stops. And you need to make sure you get that right. The pilots and proof of concept is the way we prove out the data. And then you've got business critical departments, business critical apps. Again, you can go into that and pilot it, make sure it works, get the sign off from the business, you're verified, and off you go. That will reduce the amount of issues you get, and again, make it manageable. Excuse me. And the health checks. Can your estate take the weight of Office 365? So I know we've touched on SCCM and we've touched on network. You've got, as you can see in there, your Active Directory, Exchange servers, the architecture, the firewalls, the security. You know, security is a big, big thing. It's got to be up to date. You've got to make sure we can roll it out to everybody. Everything needs to be in the right place for the migration to start, and also taking into account changes that are going on in other programs that may jump into your work stream and might cause some problems. So you've got to consider all of that as well.
Yeah, I think we've all talked about this, I think, in previous sessions, you know, whether it be David or some I've talked about, or Andrew or others, Tracy, is the key around all of this, I always think, is, you know, get the stakeholders, work with the stakeholders, get their buy-in, the communications plan, get the business to actually do the business and change plan, not the IT team, you know, or do it in conjunction with. Do the discovery, understand your estate properly right at the beginning. You know, don't, you know, as you go through, it's good common sort of sense around those digital transformation approaches. Sam, I'm just conscious of time. I know we've got people in there, but do we just want to open it up just now?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I'm cool with that. I think Paddy, you've covered so much detail there, and it's really an eye opener for me, and I'm sure for everybody, just to see the sort of minute detail that you have to consider. That, you know, probably a lot of us at a strategic level don't really have to get involved with, but having somebody like yourself on a project like this is clearly, you know, crucial for the success. But I do want to pick up on, and I guess open up to everyone else about the people and about the comms plan. And I do think that is, you know, a big part of this. So I will start putting the questions out to everyone. First of all, we've got Mario, who'd like to ask a question. So Mario,
I love his background. Never mind the question. I just love his background. Is it
my favorite movie.
Mario, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Mario.
You've got a question for the panel.
Yeah, it's for the panel. It's actually more to do with the cultural side impact of what Paddy's been describing. I think technically, I can understand what Paddy's saying. My big question that I'm hitting day in, day out is, and I hate this term, the new normal, whatever that means.
I know.
But, exactly. But in terms of working virtually, working from home, working wherever you can work, one of the big questions I'm being hip up on is mainly to do with how does an organization maintain corporate culture? corporate culture in the terms of their behavior that they've already done maybe over the past 50 years, but this new way of working, how do they maintain corporate culture?
Yeah, it's difficult when you've got access to so many downloads. You can just download Zoom.
Exactly.
You can just download Google. So you can restrict that. From my point of view, when I've seen this sort of thing happen, is all corporate meetings now are done on the standard. So you would go to your meeting place. So when you had room booking tools and stuff like that, and you have to book via that. And if you roll it out and it's an option there and it's well explained, that is as best as you can do. The other thing you can do is shut down them being able to use other tools, but that's not really conducive to letting everyone do what they need to do. So it is, from my side, my opinion of that would be it's communication, making sure people find it easy. Their journey to get to that it's there. They just click on it. They don't have to go and download it.
I'd come at this a different way, to be honest, Mario. I think so. It's a brilliant question, by the way. And one of the last customers I did this with, it was a global organization that actually had multiple cultures, so you can even more complicated. So you've got different organizations globally, different cultures within, I'd say Europe, and I'm separating Britain from Europe. You know, you've got Central European culture, British culture, etc. The thing, and this is where the business change and enablement piece comes in. You know, it's not just about the technology program. In fact, push technology to a side. It's what culture do you want to have? You know, how do you wrap people into that? How do you engage with them? So some of the cultural changes, and again, real world example, the chief exec decided, so he wanted a modern workplace approach where he wanted to be able to speak to all the 65,000 store colleagues, right? So a culture where they could actually interact directly with the chief exec and he could speak directly to them. So looking at that, you implemented something like on the Microsoft stack, that was Yammer. So it was effectively almost like a internal social media platform where you could post and interact in conversations, and the C-suite would then basically develop a culture where literally anybody could ask a question. It was like an online, I call it the Twitter for enterprise. I don't know whether that's fair, but it's kind of like that. The culture could then evolve, things like with Teams, and again, there's other technologies from other vendors, but what you start to do is build up, if you use maybe Boots as a microcosm, brilliant example, the pharmacists or areas wanted to have communities and the culture of community. And you could use Teams to build the culture of community. Now, there's effort goes in, everything from, Paddy mentioned SharePoint, developing a brand presence, developing an inclusive presence, HR getting involved, to your point, Mario, about the type of culture and type of behavior that is expected and standards expected as you do things, whether it be on Yammer, whether it be on the VCs, whether it be on Team Chat. It is not a trivial thing. To your point, you've got decades of embedded culture and ways of working, and COVID's almost twisted that on its head overnight. People had been thinking about it, but it's kind of turned it. But I think the key is always not to start with the technology solution, and start with that. What does the business think its culture needs to be moving forward? How do they want to build a culture? Try and retain as much as possible of that existing culture. But my view is that culture is going to change.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
thank you. I mean, Paddy made a very good point as well. I think from my point of view, that's why I asked the question, because I think, Simon, you're quite right. It's genetic, it's strategic. And you made the comment about my background. That may be okay for this community, that background of a guy with a gun, but in another community, that may not be okay at all.
Yes.
So I think it's a mixture of having the tools, the right tool, I think, which Paddy was saying, that you can control things like my background in a way whereby it's acceptable, but also having the agility and the ability to provide, whether that be through senior management, up or down the organization, and mechanism that people feel comfortable and able to provide that community of, I should say, a Twitter style internal approach. So yeah, I think the reason I'm asked the question is because I've had that question asked of me for the past 2 months, several times, and I have no one answer. I think every organization is going to be different.
Everybody's going to be different, and I think there are other angles as well, Mario, to think about it. And Damian and I have been having this discussion over the last number of weeks. You know, things like accessibility.
Yeah.
You know, the organizations potentially have spent a lot of time and effort in a traditional workplace to ensure that they have accessibility and support, appropriate support within the office space and access and things like that. What does that mean online?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that suddenly becomes even more important, because you have people who are, you know, we've all had to self-isolate, we all had to change it, but it potentially could compound issues. So you've got to think, I mean, culturally, the way that you work to make sure that it's accessible to all is, I think, even more important now than it probably has been. So there's other things we need to take into consideration. I think it is not a trivial problem. I think it's something that, to your point, whatever this new normal is, we don't know what it is. And it's going to be different to different communities as well. I mean, Damian, sorry, you have to come off mute. Is it, you know, do you have a view?
Basically, I really like Office 360, but if you look at the background of Office 360 and the architecture around it, it's not inclusive for assistive technology, because a lot of assistive technology needs on the person's computer. Otherwise it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So how do you marry the sort of Office 360 with possibly a hybrid, if needs be?
I mean, I think that's a brilliant point, and I think that's something we need to. I mean, you and I have been discussing this a little bit. Not just why that's, by the way, that's not why I just think it's a brilliant point, because myself and Damian have been discussing it. But it's, you know, we've been looking at those on device pieces of technology that, you know, make, you know, people like Damian easier. The cloud, to your point, the cloud, Damian, is it gives you that's distance. The integration. But I was actually speaking to somebody at Amazon and somebody at Microsoft this morning about different things, but we talked about that and how they're trying to use. I think they're on a journey, Damian. I think we know they're on a journey. I think where they want to get to is the right place, but that ain't going to be an overnight thing. So when you're looking at these types of solutions, you need to be inclusive, to your point about, you know, so we focus on a lot on Teams and Office 365. Paddy was going to talk about Windows 10, but that desktop, those pieces of software that interacts with the likes of Teams, as an example, that becomes really important. And I think they're on a journey. It's not perfect at all, is it? You know.
No. And can I just come back to you on that, Simon? When I did some work with Google and Microsoft on a screen reader, they really did have to look at the global ecosystem that is now being used, because you have to make software engaging and accessible, otherwise you won't get the buy-in that Paddy says you need.
Yeah, no, you're right. So you're right. But go back to Mario's point. You know, we need to, when we're looking at culture, we need to make sure it is all inclusive. Yeah. Really, it has to be a fundamental premise of everything that we really do now.
I think just to add to that, I think your kind of values, your vision as a business kind of play into this, don't they? And I think in terms of how you build a culture, you've got to make sure you've got a really strong vision, a really strong sense of purpose in your organization. Why are you doing what you're doing? Because if that is solely profit, then that's not going to necessarily drive the right behaviors. And I think if you've got that really strong vision and you can draw a dotted line down into technology, so this is similar to what we talk about with the data strategy stuff. You know, what's your vision? What are your objectives? And how do you draw a dotted line down into what you're doing? I've heard so many times, you know, people kind of say, there's a load of guys sat in a room doing some stuff and I don't know what they're doing. Now, I think it's really important that, you know, the guys doing the Office 365 migration, or the guys building the data warehouse, you know, one of the things we did at Jaguar Land Rover is we created a video including personas. So at the moment, these guys are unable to do this. and this is how the project is going to change the way that they operate and the way that they work, and how it's going to help us as a broader business. And all of a sudden, everyone started to get excited about the project, rather than go, oh, there's a load of guys sat in a room doing some stuff. They saw the bigger picture. They saw how it was going to help improve their lives in the long term, and they got on board, and they bought into the journey. So I think having a clear vision, having a clear why, and actually drawing a dotted line down into those initiatives that are happening on the ground is really, really important.
Yep. Mario, any more views on that in terms of, I don't know if that's, we talked about it.
I think that's excellent. And I think, like everybody, we're all going through this learning as we go along. I think a lot of that, I think what David said, absolutely agree. The values in particular need to be in line with what the organization wants to do with its future. So yeah, totally agree. Thank you. Great.
Great question. Great question.
Thanks for that, Mario, and I really appreciate your input there, Damian. Would anybody else like to ask any questions to Simon or to Paddy? Anything that they talked about in particular? Hi, David.
Go on, Damian. Sorry, I think you're on mute,
Damian.
I'd love an off-the-record conversation with you around Office 360, Paddy. So I'll send you a diary marker.
Yeah, do. No problem at all, Damian. No problem at all.
Susan, have you got a question for us?
Yeah, just one question. Thanks for that. That was very interesting. Do you see that Microsoft are trying to do almost like for the shop worker, the way that Amazon is trying to do for the shopper, i.e. that they will provide everything? So eventually Microsoft might create a LinkedIn type portal, which therefore nobody has to go to any other app other than what's on Microsoft. See that?
Good question.
Yes. So I can tell you from experience, the answer to that is yes. There is a whether they will have a complete solution or whether they will partner with retailers to create the solution, but the vision is very much if you are a colleague in a store, you will have access on a device to your own information, but potentially information in real time about the customer that you're engaging with. So, that can be sales assist, some sort of sales assist or service assist, powered by AI with recommendations and such like, but allowing real-time collaboration with colleagues elsewhere within the store or in back office to ask questions and be able to support that customer. And it's really a kind of an O2O, online to offline kind of journey to support the customer through. Now, that also means that supporting colleagues in the store, I think everything from the store operating model and operating processes, helping assess the workflow and everything through there, how you're setting up, opening the store in the day, you're doing your stock checks, you're doing whatever it might be. So very, very much Microsoft are involved in that space. They actually have, if you look at how Microsoft will engage on a consulting engagement, they normally have a number of what they call horizons. Horizon 1 is typically the infrastructure and core technology. Horizon 2 is very much focused on business transformation and new business ideas and business optimization. But that's when they pull together those components. To your point, Susan, they would be looking for potentially a Teams front end integrated with data and analytics via Power BI dashboards that would come through that, with Dynamics 365 at the back end, providing real-time customer 360 intelligence to the core store colleague.
Okay.
Absolutely where they're going. And most retailers, for example, would want that. That's, you want the ability to be able to service a customer in real time with all the information about that customer at a colleague's hands. Yes. Comes with that is quite a transformation in the store. We've talked about change management and such like for just even the collaboration piece, but that's quite a big piece. But there will be more definitely more automation, more real-time data at the hands of colleagues. Not a pure Amazon Go play, because I don't think they're there, but they have the components to do an Amazon Go. Yeah. Definitely they do. I've not seen them go into that because they're not a retailer, whereas Amazon is a retailer themselves. But they could certainly enable. They could definitely enable. Yeah. You know, that type of technology. And I do know they're working with a whole range of retailers globally on those types of problems.
I think it would be great to give at least somebody a bit of competition against Amazon, because they're going to take over the world. If we don't
they might be watching. Shush.
Well, they are. They're definitely listening. They're definitely listening, Paddy.
They are, and that you know, when you're talking about that customer journey, you look at, you know, whatever you look at on Amazon pops up the next day. I've been looking at push bikes, and I can't go onto Facebook without someone trying to sell me a push bike. It's that real-time information coming through. But I think for businesses as well, when you look at Teams, going back to that product, when it lends itself to everybody working in the same way. Because when you look at Teams, you can then go onto SharePoint and open up a database or a live document with, you know, you're in Glasgow and one's in London, and you're both looking at the same document, making changes to it. So just that piece there all works itself together and lends itself to the fact that, why would I want to use Teams? Well, because we can all access our documents together. You can't do that if you're on Zoom and go back into the corporation digital estate and open up documents.
I think it was Andrew might have mentioned it earlier on, but you know, one of the things it's that ways of working, one of the nervousness around it, to be honest, Susan, that I'm finding is there is a nervousness within enterprise, and David will appreciate this, of allowing people to access data in that kind of real time, or more data, and it's been able to make sure that the colleague gets the right information that they need at the right time in order to provide outstanding service to a customer. The information security, what's exposed, how that's exposed. You know, so Paddy's example, you know, you could just open up a database and let people access it, but that may or may not be the right thing, depending on what the data's in there and what people can do with it. So the curation, control, and exposure of it is really important. But this is what they're looking at, which is how could you have that sales or service assist type approach, where effectively the colleague can't access all the data, but the appropriate data and insight is provided to the colleague depending on the user journey that they're trying to support at that time. I think it's brilliant stuff. I think the technology's there.
Yeah.
I think that some of the biggest challenges are actually the enterprises and organizations themselves, because it's hard to suddenly go from having 65,000 colleagues that don't even have an email address.
Yes.
Through to suddenly they've got an identity, they're logging in, you're providing them with information. That takes a bit of time. I think COVID again is, you know, necessity is the mother of all invention. I think some of these things are driving this change. But to your point, the Amazon Go platform, interestingly enough, they are packaging that and selling it as a white label platform now.
That's
so
really
other retailers can actually buy that underlying platform. Right. Now, why would Amazon do that? Because all the data runs on their platform.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Great. It's a really, really good question. And thanks to Simon, brilliant. Paddy, brilliant for that. We do. I'm talking about curation. I am trying to curate here. Lionel, you've got a question for us. I think you're raising your hand. Lionel, do you want to come off mute and ask Simon, Paddy, your question?
Yeah, hi. Well, it kind of links up with everything that's been discussed, but maybe with a slight twist. So in my recent professional life, I've experienced a very, very big multinational company, a bit of a dinosaur when it comes to IT stuff. And well, all the challenges that you've mentioned, I did experience them. Anything to try and modernize, anything to try and future-proof was received with a lot of caution or fight back. So the biggest example is the need to move away from Windows 7 to Windows 10 because Windows 7 is going to be deprecated.
Yeah.
That was just one of the many examples where IT had to fight just to get the message across that it was needed. There was no question about whether we should do it or not.
Yeah.
So I was just interested to know a bit about the people here. What was their experience when it comes to the stakeholders or the decision makers who are not really necessarily tech savvy and don't really think IT is that's important in their big organization. Have you guys ever experienced this, where moving to Office 365 or more modern tools towards this new normal has been a challenge from the top down?
I'm gonna before you start, I think I'm gonna bring in Tracy.
Brilliant. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in for many clients where things have started to go quite pear-shaped, and they've said, why is this not working? What's really important to understand is bring the board and bring the most senior within the company on that journey with you first. You have to let them understand what is it that they're going to miss out on? What is it that's going to give them a headache further down the line? It's a great way to do it via personas. One of the big things, if you're talking to a financial director, is technical debt. It's a wonderful phrase that they've heard many times. If we don't do this now, this is what it's going to cost you further down the line.
Yep.
And you have to bring them on board with that journey by explaining that the money that we spend now is going to be perhaps 2, 3, 5, 10 times less the longer we leave it as that technology ages, and we can't just upgrade to the next version. So it's really important to understand who the key players are within that board, who the most senior people are to making those decisions, and talk to them in a language that they can cope with and that they understand in order to bring them on board with what you're trying to do. It's different with every organization, every type. The locus of power, as it's called, is in a different place for every single board. And you need to talk to them in terms that they understand with a business case that they'll get quite quickly to then cascade that down through the organization.
Yeah, totally agree with that, Tracy. I think, and it goes back to the point: engage those stakeholders early, get them on board right at the beginning. Don't make it a technology project. Make it about them. Make it about the business. And to your point, Susan, make it about the colleague. And bring it to life. And I mean, one of the other things, Lionel, I found is you can use your partners, and I use that partner rather than suppliers in some of these technology spaces to help on that journey. They have a lot of material because they hit this, as Tracy points out, they hit this all the time. So, but don't do it as a tech play. Don't pull Microsoft in to present technology. Bring Microsoft in to talk about how they solve a business problem, and how that, and you can go online. I mean, what we've certainly found is, or I've certainly found is, Windows 7 is a classic example, but the Teams one, there's a lot of resistance to that as well. Interestingly enough, COVID suddenly got over all those challenges overnight, and literally overnight. And that is another technique, by the way. If you can, and Tracy will value your view on this, but per industry or per global world, if you have a compelling event of some sort, that's a great thing to hang change on. Because the business needs evolve potentially quite quickly. COVID was one, post-COVID is another. People are having to transform to survive, never mind thrive. So use those compelling events. I don't know your view on that, Tracy.
Yeah, absolutely. COVID's done some really horrible things for this country, but it's also done some real positive things in perhaps moving us forward 5 or 10 years faster than we would have been. Lots of companies that wouldn't have adopted have suddenly got an innovation budget that's there right now and that you can use. So use that now, use the impetus, use the fact that everybody is on board, and we have this event where you don't have to do that big change piece in order to move people forward. It's there now, so it's a really good time to use that advantage.
they've got to pay all that money out in real estate as well. That's going to be a surprising change to the workplace environment, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a really valid point and a great point how COVID's this kind of black swan moment that we're all living through now. I just want to bring in Ali, and actually, Ali, your question's really, really relevant to a conversation that Simon and I are currently talking about. So I think Ali's got a question for you, Paddy, and for you, Simon. Simon, actually, you might be able to answer this one, and it's about legacy applications. Mm-hmm. So, Ali, do you want to ask that? Unmute yourself and go for it, please.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Sam.
Hi,
I've experienced some migrations where I've worked for a third-party application where it was using Microsoft and needed to integrate into back-end products. And historically, you still find a lot of enterprises, going back onto some of the other people who've been on talking about historical stuff, is you're working with some very older operating systems like AS400s, which might still be linked to, even this particular client had like 5,000 users still using XP because they couldn't migrate Exchange because they had to then upgrade the operating system, which was the AS400, which was huge as well. So that whole cost of migrating out was massive.
Yeah.
So how have you guys kind of maybe dealt with those type of scenarios?
That's a brilliant question, mate. I love that one.
Do you want to take that one, Simon?
Do you want to take it? Do you say, Paddy?
Well, I've seen these before. Obviously, you have to, depending on the size of the application, and this is where the due diligence piece comes into play. And the phase one is making sure we know what our platform and our estate looks like and the applications. And then you're looking at that packaging, lead times. Can it be done? Can it be upgraded? What do we need to do? Is it physical? Is it on-prem? The bit I was going to add in, there are things like you can, set up virtual desktops in Citrix, and you can do emulators to bring that across. But when you're looking at the background and the heavy stuff, Simon, that's more your area of how that would be done, and you move forward to that final solution. So as an interim, what I found happens is you put in some sort of emulator or a virtual desktop that can run the software, but then you've got to look at moving that forward. But that's why it all is very important for that phase one piece, is to make sure we understand what are our problem children going to be and what should our approach be. And it may be, in order to move everyone through, the majority, you're going to de-scope, and there is going to be 5%, 10% left that are not being migrated across. If you've got that mitigation plan, you've got somewhere to go in the future.
Yeah, I agree with all that, Paddy. I think, Ali, I did a presentation a few weeks ago, and it was kind of addressing this from the back end side. So, I mean, fundamentally, the same thing. You need to have a holistic approach to your estate and understand what that estate is. You then can look at what you can potentially lift and shift or modernize or replace, demise slash replace as a holistically. Integration, so virtualization, being able to virtualize, and there are lots of technologies today that will allow you to virtualize even some of those in old environments. But that virtualization comes with compromise, because you still have the same old, if you're running XP or even Windows 7 or these things, you've got security risks. You've not got patching, you've got security risks. So virtualizing, yes, it will give you an element of longevity, but you're just moving the problem potentially from here to there. Integration, there are lots of new technologies now that will allow you to integrate the what I call the modern estate with the heritage estate. And even recently, I'm just going to pick on Microsoft again because we've been talking about them, but they all kind of have it. Microsoft, there's Logic apps and Power apps and these various things that are constructed with hundreds of connectors that allow you to try and integrate that legacy world in. Ultimately, and I think the estate that sounds like you've worked in is very similar to many that I've worked in. You will end up with a hybrid approach where you potentially will still have some that are on premise or in a colo or are a managed service by somebody else. So if it's an AS400, a mainframe or Z series or something, you might move that somewhere else and somebody else will take care of it, but you'll have connectivity through to it if you were doing that cloud migration. There isn't a one size fits all, mate. I found it all. It depends on the scenario. It depends on the roadmap and change agenda of the organization as well. You know, customers I've worked with in the past, you know, always work in the strategy, work with the stakeholders, work in the strategy, look at the end point, and then look at the transition states as you're going across. The point maybe you want to come off the mainframe, but it's going to take 5 years. So what do you do in the interim to start to decouple? You know, can you decouple? Can you open up? Can you bring these new integration points? Can you move workloads? You know, quite often a lot of these mainframes have got workloads. You can actually start to move on. You know, and David will talk. You know, he'll get, you know, hopefully back me up around, you know, data and analytics. You move these workloads off the mainframe, move them onto modern technology. Suddenly you open them up, and gradually you demise these workloads. So it's typically a combination of virtualization, modernization, integrate. There's all the ins here, all the integrations, and a combination of that allows you to try and get to the end state. There ain't a silver bullet, mate. With all, you know, you're shaking. I think you're nodding the head there in agreement. I think, but
well, yeah. I mean, for us, I mean, we were, as I say, a third-party application that was running with a modern software which ran on Windows 10, and you know, all the modern operating systems that Windows uses. And they then sprung the trap of saying, yeah, but we need to integrate with XP, and your software needs to be back. Why isn't it backdated to XP? And we're like, sorry, what?
Yeah.
You know, they'd hidden that. I mean, but then they kind of came out, well, it's actually integrated into the AS400, and we've got 3,000 users on it. So you're like, okay.
You're looking at an integration approach there, aren't you?
Well, they had to come up. We couldn't do anything. They had to come up with putting in terminals to allow the modern operating system for them to be able to access it. But so that was their workaround in the short term. Whilst they obviously had to work out how they're going to move the whole business off of that at some point. But I was just it was just curious to see how you guys, because you got some really good knowledge. I was just interested to see how you guys have approached some of that before.
It's to your point. You could switch on that virtualization front end terminal service. You can give it longevity, but Ali, it doesn't sort out your mid to long term. The problem is you still have to solve the problem. You know, at some point somebody has to jump, migrate, modernize. Otherwise, you'll always, the technical debt that Tracy was talking about, it's always there.
Yeah, I think. Otherwise. What I've seen for that, when you do that, you give it some longevity and put something in. It does give you then time to go put the weight on the vendor and see if they've got their up-to-date product or what their plans are to do. So you might say, right, we are going to take 2 years, but we'll get there. Then you're looking at your new product and changing to something else. I mean, examples of that, and I think it's still the case. Gatwick Airport, I did a project up there. All their escalators still run on 4 NT4 PCs that we found at the back of a cleaning cupboard. Okay, and the engineer went to pull the plug, and he phoned me up, and I was doing the mapping, so project coordinator way back then, doing the mapping for where everything went, and we had no idea what it was. And I said, hold on to it, and we found this guy in a room. He said, no, don't pull that. It would have stopped every escalator in Gatwick. So we then knew what we had. We'd found out the key is, if you know what you've got to do at that point at the start, when you're doing that due diligence and discovery, then that's when you kick that sort of other arm of the project off to go, right, we've got to find a solution for this. So do we de-scope? Can we get a solution in place before we get to the end of migration? And that's where your scheduling comes into play of, right, we'll front load it as in the investigation, but we're going to backload it on the schedule. So there's all that in there to try and help you. But as Simon alluded to, sometimes really you've got to throw that bit in the bin and start all over again.
It was a lot easier in 1997 when you were rolling out NT4, surely. We've come a long way since then, haven't we?
In some ways, yes, Sam. In many ways, no.
Because it's less hands-on now, isn't it? That's the thing. So it's that global reach.
It's all in the cloud.
Yeah.
It's not the cloud, though, Simon. It's just someone else's computer.
That's all you're doing. It's a rental model. It's a rental model.
You need 20 signatures to get anything done in big enterprise these days, though. That's the problem. That's the big change. It takes longer to get it signed off than it does to deliver anything now.
Yeah, putting it through change management as well, right? Making sure everyone understands what's going on. They're always a big challenge.
And on that note, we are coming up to quarter past the hour, and I know we started a little bit late. My fault. What really good session today. Thank you, everyone. Really, really appreciate it. And I think it's been really quite interactive the last 45 minutes. Paddy, thank you very much for your level of detail.
Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Really, really good. Really enjoyed it. Simon, thanks again for helping me. And thanks to everyone that's attended. Without you, then we wouldn't really be putting these things on. So really appreciate it. Next week, we have Simon Bainton coming in. Tracy, you know Simon really, really well. Unfortunately, he can't be with us today. He's a little bit poorly. He's not COVID related. I think it's just something he ate. But next week, he'll be coming on board, talking to us about something a little bit different, really. Actually about retaining skills and retaining people. And there's actually quite a bit about inclusivity and diversity. So inclusion, create an inclusive environment and culture to help retain your staff. And I think there's a lot about actually, you know, people from different backgrounds, whether it be male, female, race, creed, culture, disability, whatever. So we're going to be talking about that one. That's going to be a really interesting one. So join us next week. I feel like a TV presenter. I feel like Jeremy Clarkson or something. And
you need to get the music. You need to get some fade out music then for next week.
Don't I? Yeah. Well, I've got the shirt and the jeans. I've got the jeans combo. I just need some really bad shoes to wear. And
on that note.
on that note. But listen, thanks everyone for joining us. Really appreciate it. We'll do all of the. We'll share the notes. We'll share the PowerPoint presentation. And the video will be online in the next couple of hours, and you can direct people to it. But thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Take care, all.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Take care.
You too, Sam.
See you later.
Sam, I've got to make a
nice day.
Sam, I've got to make a couple of calls, so I'll give you a little call once I've done that. If that's okay.
Brilliant, Paddy. Thanks very much.
No problem. Really enjoyed that. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. You did brilliantly, mate. Thank you very much indeed.
No worries. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Damian. Really appreciate you joining us.
I'll be in touch with the thing for the workshop.
Yeah, lovely stuff. Sounds good, Damian. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hi, Tracy. You okay?
Yeah, I thought I'd say hi before you disappeared.
Oh, thank you, Tracy.
How's it going?
Yeah, good, thank you. Good. I'm just trying to stop the recording. Bear with me a second. I think when we do, where is the, if I press
you'll need to edit that one.
Oh, listen, I like the rawness of these things, and if people are really staying to watch this bit, then I think they've surely got better things to do. Atiba, how are you doing? You all right? We didn't get a chance to speak.
Yeah, we didn't. I'm actually quite good. Interesting conversations. I've been taking them in on mute, but I've gone through a number of Microsoft migrations and deployments in the public service on behalf of the government. So it's interesting. It's coming back to me. You. Yeah.
Are you still in the therapy for it?
No, that was a while back, so I've recovered.
Yeah, the public sector side is usually a lot more red tape and a lot more hard work.
Yes, yeah. So we manage an enterprise-wide license for the government. So that was 33,000 licenses. Interesting stuff.
Well, I'm going to stop recording before you say anything that maybe you're not allowed to say, Atiba. So just bear with me a second. I'm going to stop sharing first, and then I'll stop recording. Okay. I think we'll end up, when we